Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is Dave Nadler once again with the National Weather Service in Peachtree City, Atlanta, here to talk about the potential for what's turning into a potential ice storm for much of north and central parts of central Georgia this weekend. Thank you for joining us. This is being recorded, so we'll be able to share it with everybody following the live webinar here. Okay, so just kicking things off with some headlines. We do see, obviously, the potential for a significant ice storm exists for this weekend. We're using the word ice storm because our predominant precipitation type is looking like freezing rain for just about our entire, northern parts and parts of central Georgia. So that's why we kind of transitioned the wording off of winter storm to ice storm. I know there's been a lot of talk about the cold air and how far south and west it's going to get. Especially on the east side of the Appalachians, what we call cold air damming, or the wedge of cold air, that shallow cold air. There's still some uncertainty, but I will say that what we have seen this morning with some of the updated models, that models are starting to align a little bit more, and that's certainly a good sign, at least with respect to consistency and confidence. Now, what we get out of this is certainly not necessarily a good thing at this point, but at least the models are starting to come together a little bit. We did just expand our winter storm watch across parts of the area. This will include Metro Atlanta. I'll show you that in just a second. I mentioned earlier that the freezing rain ice is now the primary winter precip concern, with significant ice accumulations possible across the area, especially north and northeast Georgia by Sunday evening. We are also looking at the potential for some gusty winds, which with the weight of the ice on any trees, power lines, whatever, could just exacerbate the issue of trees coming down and potential power outage could lead to potential power outages. So that's an additional concern on top of the ice accumulation. The timing and onset of freezing rain were expected sometime kind of from north to south, late Saturday morning through Saturday afternoon, with conditions after sunset on Saturday evening deteriorating pretty quickly. And then, of course, there's the extreme cold behind this system Monday into Tuesday. Again, this is a potential significant event, not just because of the freezing rain ice potential, but this is a long duration, potentially a long duration precipitation event or winter event. Here's the latest watch. You can see we've expanded it south of I-20 to south and west there. Now includes areas from as far south as Carroll County down to Jones County, and even Washington County. And this part of it, the northern part, the start time is a little bit different. We're expecting onset a little bit sooner across the far north and northwest counties, and then across a good chunk of like the I-20, I-85 corridor, we expect it to be more. I think it starts around midday on Saturday, just based off the timing of the freezing rain and the precip. So that's the latest watch. We're still, within about 36 to 48 hours. I would anticipate in the next 24 hours or so, we'll be looking at transitioning or upgrading part or all of this watch to a warning. But as we get more information and more confidence, we'll be able to make those decisions here in the next 12 to 24 hours. We kind of talked about this yesterday, but the conditions that are coming together to support this event, big area of low pressure coming out of the Pacific, Southern California, plenty of moisture coming in off the Pacific and the Gulf of Mexico. Now we have this huge, Arctic surge of cold air coming down from the north. And so all of this is sort of coming together to support this potential winter storm or ice storm. The track of the low remains a big key, but again, regardless of sort of the track, it is important, but we're also like talking about that wedge of cold air that comes in on the east side of the Appalachians that could impact our weather with freezing rain. So definitely, we asked yesterday, we were kind of talking about not letting your guard down. And this was the reason that even some of the models that were quote unquote warmer and farther north are starting to come back down to where a few of the other models were showing more of a southerly track, keeping the cold air in place, maintaining a more extended period of like freezing rain across the area. I want to kind of show this. This is maybe a little educational slide on cold air damming, which is what CAD stands for. So when we talk about the wedge and we talk about Arctic outbreaks kind of spilling across the northern plains and into the northeast and mid-Atlantic, that cold air is so shallow, the cold air is heavier than warmer air. So it just sort of seeps south and west along the east side of the Appalachians, and then drops across South Carolina, and then parts into North Georgia and East Central Georgia. So this is actually a graphic taken from a journal that was published about 10 years ago in Weather and Forecasting, that it tells you, it kind of indicates the probability of where the strongest cold air damming events, or the highest probability of seeing cold air damming, occurs. So you can see in the oranges and reds, that's where we typically see what we call our wedge zone, or our cold air damming zone. And a lot of times what we've been talking about the last couple of days is that the models struggle with, one, bringing this colder air in, but then also maintaining it and bringing it. They really struggle with how far the southward and westward extent of it. And then they also struggle with eroding it faster than when it usually erodes. And so, especially in January, this time of year where the air masses are, it's the cold, climatologically, it's the coldest time of the year here. We keep all that in consideration when we start to see these like drastic fluctuations in the models. From this article, or from this journal, the average duration of seeing a cold air damming event, or this wedge kind of setup, is approximately 27 hours. And that doesn't mean like everybody sees that long of a duration, but just the imprint or the effect of this wedge or cold air damming could last 24 plus hours so in January. And that's something to consider when we're talking about this long duration event. So just wanted to kind of share this. I know this, we've talked a lot about wedge and cold air damming and these things that models kind of struggle with. And it's obviously not something that Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi deals with, but we do here in Georgia. Okay, so let me transition and show a couple of different models like I did yesterday. Again, predominantly looking at a freezing rain ice threat. And so what you're seeing as these kind of go into motion, in the pink is the freezing rain. Orange would be like a mixture of like sleet, freezing rain. And then of course the green would be rain. But the model on the left is pretty consistent with what we were seeing yesterday. The model on the right, it was actually the slightly warmer, more northerly track model that's now coming back more in line to what some of the other models were showing yesterday, and what we were kind of sticking to our guns about what we were expecting and anticipating for this event across the area. So one thing to note, again, once the precip kind of moves in Saturday into Saturday night, it really drives in that wedge. There is, once we get through Sunday, especially later in the day, as the entire system starts to sort of eject out, there is the possibility that we can warm up just enough across much of the area where whatever precip that could be falling just sort of transitions to more liquid as temperatures warm above freezing for a few hours. But I want everybody to keep in mind that if we do warm up on Sunday afternoon for parts of the area, which hopefully that does happen, there's much colder air like slamming in behind the system on Sunday night into Monday morning. So more than likely there will still be residual water, ice, whatever on the ground, or on, certainly trees, power lines, and other surfaces. So once that cold air comes back in Sunday night into Monday morning, everything could just like refreeze, and we could be dealing with, extensive issues even into Monday morning at this point. Let me show you just kind of our best or earliest onset for when we think, the light precip could transition to freezing rain. Across the far north and northwest part of the state, we think sometime between 7 o'clock in the morning and noon on Saturday. And then as we get through the afternoon into the early evening hours, we think that broader area across north and east central Georgia will be that wedge, that classic wedge zone. And that's what we feel like during the afternoon hours on Saturday. That's when we anticipate the freezing rain to really start developing, especially from the north, sort of starting, maybe a little bit sooner to the north in that zone, and then sort of, I wouldn't say retreating, but expanding to the south and west through the afternoon into the early evening hours. Now that darker shade of yellow or brown, whatever that is, we think that's kind of a little bit more uncertainty, but we are anticipating some threat of freezing rain in that small zone from Carrollton to Griffin to Sandersville. And we think like the onset for that would be after 6 o'clock in the evening on Saturday. So that's kind of what we're looking at for onset. We'll adjust this if we need to, but we feel pretty confident on the timing at this point of when the impacts and the threat for freezing rain is going to develop on Saturday into Saturday evening. So go ahead and start showing you some amounts. I do want to stress that the graphic that you see on the left is sort of our official forecast, but it only goes out through Sunday morning at 7 a.m. So this is not pulling in or incorporating what we could see throughout the day on Sunday. And that's because the way our system is set up, we only have ice grids and probabilities out 72 hours. So we're not that far to go beyond Sunday morning. We're just not that far out yet. So take that with a grain of salt and understand that these amounts are just through Sunday morning, and that they will likely be, if we had to do like a storm total all the way through like Sunday evening, these amounts would likely be higher. Now, what I'm showing you on the right is what we call a high-end amount, or sort of like a reasonable worst-case scenario. So what this means in probabilities is that basically looking at a 10% chance of seeing that, like, up to this much ice. So you can see is a good portion of the area, even extending down into central Georgia, where if that Arctic air mass, that wedge sort of expands farther south and east, then yeah, freezing rain potential is going to expand, the ice accumulation risk is going to expand, but the higher amounts are definitely north of I-20. And you can see even in the purple shaded areas that we could see anywhere from 3/4 to over an inch of ice accumulation. So this is not out of the realm of possibilities at this point, especially just looking at the duration of precipitation that we can see from Saturday afternoon all the way through like Sunday night. We showed the probabilities the other day. We're now getting into like our local graphics here, so we kind of get away from some of the other colors that we were showing yesterday. But again, this is through 7 a.m. We've got the probability of seeing more than 1/4 inch of ice accumulation. Basically along the I-20 corridor and north, it's more than 30–40%, and then the probabilities get higher as you go to the north and east. The graphic that you see on the right is probability of seeing more than 1/2 inch. So again, we're still a couple of days out, so we'll fine tune this as we get some newer data in, but seeing 20, 30, 40% chance of more than 1/2 inch of ice is pretty decent this far out, when there's still a lot of uncertainty on the duration, where the cold air is, how cold exactly it's going to be when it is precipitating. So these are very significant amounts of ice accumulation anytime you're getting over our thresholds for like an ice storm warning, or anything over 1/4 inch. So if we go to a winter storm warning or an ice storm warning, it will be for 1/4 inch of ice or higher amounts. Okay, let me switch slides now to winds. So mentioned that winds is going to be another condition that we'll have to consider with respect to impacts. So the combination of any ice accumulation and with these types of winds could really start to enhance or increase the risk of seeing some downed trees and power lines. So we wanted to make sure everybody was aware that, this is not an event where the winds are going to be like less than 10 miles an hour the whole time. We are going to see some periodic gusts in the 20 to 30 mile per hour range late Saturday through Sunday, and even a little bit higher in the higher elevations of north central and northeast Georgia. This next slide, I showed it yesterday. It sort of takes into account the potential ice accumulation and the winds, puts it together to kind of draw an impact slide, and you can see, or an impact level. You can see just based on kind of what we're forecasting with the winds and the ice, that we are confident that we're going to be somewhere in that orange to red category, with potentially getting up into that magenta color where we're looking at potential to see prolonged outages and widespread interruptions in power and other conditions with roads and things like that. So just kind of have this out there. We've been sharing it on our social media pages as well. So let me just tab through our temperature forecast for Saturday. Saturday, ahead of the precipitation, we are expected to kind of get into the 30s, maybe lower 40s in the areas of concern. But through the afternoon, as the precipitation starts to come in and that wedge, that colder air starts to build in from the north, we do expect temperatures to actually fall throughout the afternoon into the evening. So these highs that you see on the left are probably going to be early in the day. Overnight, we drop down below freezing for a good chunk of the area, and these might be conservative. We might be even a little bit colder, like mid to upper 20s down to Atlanta, and then up towards Rome and Dalton. So we're going to fine tune this, of course, but this is kind of what our forecast has right now. So obviously a good chunk of the area seeing freezing rain are going to be at or below 32 degrees as we go into Saturday night and early Sunday morning. And then looking at our highs for Sunday, again, this is a situation where these highs could actually occur later in the day for a couple of hours, but early in the day, with much of that freezing rain kind of moving through, we expect the temperatures to be anywhere from the mid to upper 20s to the lower 30s for a good chunk of the area north of I-20, along the I-85 corridor, and east of I-75. So this could be a little deceiving, but there is a small chance that we warm up just enough late in the day where we can transition a good, batch of the freezing rain back over to rain before things kind of come to an end on Sunday evening. So that would certainly be a little bit of good news to maybe help melt some of this off. But look what happens on Sunday night. The bottom falls out with the temperatures falling back into the 20s and teens across a good portion of the area by Monday morning. And then looking ahead into Monday, we're not expected to warm up much. And then Monday night, we have temperatures dropping into the single digits and teens across much of the area. So this could definitely pose a lingering threat, an impact across the area based off of whatever remains, whatever liquid or water remains on the ground heading into Monday and Monday night. So let me just wrap things up and show you. We kind of did something like this yesterday, but we have a little bit more confidence looking at this freezing rain ice storm potential of where the most significant impacts will be at this point. And kind of in the core of that wedge zone in northeast and east central Georgia is where we anticipate the coldest air to be and the highest ice accumulations to occur. Not to mention some of the strongest wind gusts at times. So that's where we kind of shaded the red. So on the east side there, Blairsville down towards North Fulton, Gwinnett, Athens, Gainesville, you're all in that zone of biggest concern. And then in the orange area, right now I've got moderate, still very, very dangerous, significant situation with ice accumulations anywhere from 1/10 to 1/2 inch, locally higher amounts possible, combination with the winds. And we're looking at, a pretty significant dangerous situation developing there. As we head farther south, there's a little bit more uncertainty with the colder air and the freezing rain potential, but definitely don't want to let your guard down. And if you're anywhere from Carroll County to Spalding, down towards Washington County, we've got you in a winter storm watch right now. So that's enough to say, hey, our confidence is high enough that you're going to see some sort of freezing rain throughout, from Saturday night through Sunday. All right, so let's wrap this up. Again, lot going on. Primary concern, obviously, now is freezing rain, ice potential across a good portion of the area. We have a lot of concern about the amounts of ice that we could see, especially in an area over northeast and east central Georgia, where this wedge of cold air could really be sitting in place for like 18 to 24 hours as we get precipitation moving across the area. So, we haven't seen these types of potential ice accumulations in quite a while. I think go back into like 2014 or so. That's definitely something to be ready for. I hope that everybody is taking this very seriously. We've expanded our winter storm watch across a good portion of the area. We'll look to upgrade or expand the watch at some point, probably overnight tonight into the day tomorrow, as we get some new information. Confidence starts to increase in the areas that we feel are going to get hit hardest. And we can't, rule out the potential for gusty winds along with the ice accumulation occurring. That's also going to create enhanced impacts. So with that, we'll conclude our briefing this afternoon on this. We're going to continue to update you all through email. We'll be in chat. We are planning to do another live webinar tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m.